Members' motion with no legislative effect. Dr. Chan Han-pan's motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage problems. Members who wish to speak, please press the request to speak button. I now call upon Dr. Chan Han-pan to speak and move the motion. President, I move that the motion as printed on the agenda be passed. Water seepage problems in buildings in Hong Kong have long affected residents' quality of life and safety in their living condition, causing them financial losses and exposing them to potential health risks. Now, the Joint Office for Investigation of water seepage complaints is set up by the Buildings Department and the FEHD, but their work have been criticized from time to time over the years. Now, we often receive complaints from local residents about concrete spalling, water seepage, and that affects the living environment in general. Now, these are not trivial problems. These actually affect the quality of living among citizens, and that is why I'm moving the motion today, so that the government can look squarely into the problem and help members of the public solve this long-standing issue. Water seepage problem is a nuisance to the public. According to the government statistics, in 2022, 40,000 cases were recorded. By this year, the figure has risen to 47,000. In other words, 130 households are victims of water seepage problems every day, and they suffer. Now, this is also a threat to building safety. In 2022, 570 buildings were found to have structural safety problems. Now, last year, 1,200 cases were recorded, up by 100%, and I think water seepage is a major cause. Now, with the rapidly aging building stock in Hong Kong, we need to be vigilant. This is a really thorny issue. Now, in fact, if we take a look at reports issued before, in 2016, the Director of Audit published a report on the consultancy firms or outsourced companies to investigate water seepage problems. A case was recorded to have taken 2 years to resolve. In 2020, the Ombudsman also issued a report about the low efficiency of the Joint Office, with a heavy backlog of 30–40% of cases not being tackled. Now, despite the recent improvement measures such as the introduction of a pre-warning letters, there is still room for further improvement. We need an overhaul and a major reform. In the policy address, the government has proposed a number of new initiatives. Starting from last year, or in fact starting from the first half of next year, infrared thermography will be used to ascertain the liability of water seepage problems. A time frame will be set for the owner living upstairs to conduct checks and take remedial action, or costs will be recovered. A streamlined mechanism will be put in place, and that the days of investigation may be shortened to just 14 days instead of several years. But it is questionable whether we have sufficient technical professionals to handle the new devices such as the IT and MT equipment. Now, on this basis, I have a number of suggestions on taking forward the reform. The first one is for the Buildings Department to take a stronger leading role in the Joint Office. Now, the Joint Office is manned by the Buildings Department as well as the FEHD, but I think the Buildings Department should take up a more prominent role. Water seepage very often has to do with structural safety of buildings and building maintenance. Now, earlier at a seminar, I listened to some professionals' advice. Under the existing buildings ordinance, subsidiary legislation should be made so as to allow the Buildings Department to take the lead in conducting investigation and taking enforcement actions to ensure efficiency. The FEHD should also regularly review the provisions of the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance. The second suggestion is to give greater protection to the interests of consumers, and that means we should regulate waterproofing works. Now, there are problems in the private market, and there may be a big difference in terms of how much a contractor charges. A professional registration system for waterproofing works should be put in place, similar to those for plumbers and other technicians, so as to draw up the standard procedures for waterproofing works. The third suggestion is to introduce simpler judicial procedures for handling disputes. As I understand, very often if the matter is taken to court, it will be a waste of time and money, and very often the cumbersome procedures will cause a deterrence to those who like to seek justice. A more streamlined judicial procedure should be put in place. There should be a dedicated unit set up to handle dispute resolution through mediation. For example, we should leverage on the community networks to assist in handling disputes to enhance effectiveness. The fourth suggestion is to reform the regulatory regime for outsourced consultants. Now, this is based on the findings of the Ombudsman's report. The regulatory regime for outsourced consultants has been ineffective. We need to introduce a reform, and that means something like a bonus system. For example, if the consultant is able to identify the source of water seepage, a bonus can be given. On the contrary, if it takes too much time or if the work is not up to standard, the consultant should be barred from bidding for future projects. The fifth suggestion is to establish case managers and serious case teams within the joint office to follow up on cases. According to local residents, very often after making a complaint, no update is provided. The office will not actively reach out to complainants. So we need to establish case managers to make sure that each case is followed up on by respective managers so that on a regular basis, updates will be provided to complainants. Now, for more complex cases, serious case teams should be set up so that resources can be pulled together to solve the complex cases. Now, the sixth suggestion is to make use of advanced testing technologies. Now, the infrared tomography technology is, of course, a good start, but as technological advancements happen very rapidly nowadays, we need to introduce more advanced equipment. For example, at the professionals seminar, I heard a professional proposing using microwave tomography instead of IT, because this technology will provide greater precision and reliability, and it will be a more expeditious procedure to identify the source of water seepage. So I think all these should be done to tackle the source of water seepage. We should not let local residents wait for a long time. Now, President, it is the aspiration of every citizen that they can have a roof over their head without any water seepage problem. Everyone should be able to enjoy a good living environment. This is also the aspiration in the policy address. Now that there are new initiatives, we see light at the end of the tunnel, but we need to translate that into action. I hope members will support my motion so that it can be incorporated in the reform blueprint, and that with a concerted effort we can build a better home for everyone.
I now propose a question to you that Dr. Ben Chen's motion be passed. Secretary for Environment and Ecology. President, I would like to thank Dr. Ben Chen for moving this motion. It provides an opportunity for members to discuss the mechanism for handling water seepage in buildings. I'd like to give an overview of the use of mediation in resolving water seepage disputes as mentioned in the policy address, the enhancement of the pilot scheme for handling water seepage in buildings, and the government's legislative amendments to strengthen investigation and deterrence against nuisances such as water seepage. Well, the FEHD and the Buildings Department have jointly set up a joint office to look into water seepage problems. There's a one-stop platform to handle water seepage cases. Buildings Department staff members make good use of their expertise to identify the sources of water seepage. The Buildings Ordinance as well as the Waterworks Ordinance will be invoked in the handling of these matters, whereas the Public Health Municipal Services Ordinance will be invoked to handle public health nuisances. In recent years, the government has been vigorously promoting the use of negotiation and mediation to resolve water seepage disputes. In the past 3 years, there have been cases which have been successfully resolved. The figure stood at a total of 70% of the cases. We have the scheme of participation by property management agents in tackling water seepage in residential buildings. Over 200 property management companies are now participating in the scheme, under which property management companies coordinate and advise residents to resolve water seepage issues through mediation or civil means. In addition, the EEB, FEHD, and the DOJ launched the pilot scheme on community mediation in July this year. It provides full-time mediation skills training for property management personnel to help them to handle water seepage cases more effectively. In order to encourage owners to promptly fulfill their responsibility for proper property maintenance, the Chief Executive announced in the 2025 policy address that the Joint Office will launch a pilot scheme in the first half of 2026 to enhance the procedures for handling water seepage in buildings. Under the pilot scheme, the JO will adopt infrared tests at the first stage of water seepage investigation to expedite the identification of the source. If the results show that the seepage exceeds the specified moisture level and is caused by the upper unit, a notification letter will be issued to the owner of the upper floor unit, requiring the owner to inspect and repair within the specified period of their own. If the owner fails to act within the deadline and seepage persists, the JO will proceed to the second and third stages. We expect that the time required will be significantly reduced from about 71 working days to 14 working days. And the inspection costs will be recovered from the unit owners. We'll continue to review the tools that can be applied to the testing. And the second and the third stages will also be combined and taken forward in parallel. As we expect, by promoting negotiation or mediation and implementing the arrangement for recovering investigation fees under the pilot scheme, the number of cases requiring prosecution investigation by the JO can be effectively reduced. In order to make it convenient for the FEHD to handle water seepage buildings leading to public health nuisances, we have already made amendments to CAP 132, that is the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance. When one prevents any public officials from entering the premises to conduct investigation without any lawful excuse, then that person concerned breaks the law and will be subject to criminal investigation and conviction. I'm going to listen carefully to members' views on the motion and will respond further in my concluding remarks. Thank you.
Acting Secretary for Development. Madam Deputy, I thank Dr. Ben Chen for moving this motion so that we can exchange views on this topic about water seepage. Here, I want to highlight the role of the Buildings Department in providing technical support and their key measures. Under the Joint Office, each department focuses on its role and they work together. So if it is a nuisance under the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance, the matter goes to the FEHD. If, on the other hand, it's about building safety or improper or defective exposed drainage pipes, the matter goes to the Buildings Department, and then the BD will act according to the Buildings Department, and that means issuing advisory letters, building repair orders, investigation orders, drainage repair orders. And if it's about leaky potable water mains, the case goes to the Water Supplies Department so that the repair notices can be issued under the Waterworks Ordinance. This arrangement makes sense because each department will be able to leverage its own professional expertise in handling the water seepage cases. The Buildings Department has been actively exploring new technologies in testing the water seepage cases, and that will help building owners deal with the problem. So in recent years, we brought in microwave tomography and infrared thermography. These new technologies have led to much greater success in identifying the source of seepage. Where possible, the Joint Office has also adopted the new technologies as the preferred investigation tools for Stage 3 investigation. And the Buildings Department has also started using more portable infrared testing devices for Stage 1 testing. This will help us identify the sources of the water seepage early on. We will be looking out for overseas technologies. Where suitable, we will bring in those technologies. The Buildings Department has an external consultant to assist with investigations into water seepage cases. We have been closely watching the performance of our consultant. This means regular work meetings and bi-weekly reports that will help us keep track of their work progress. For time-consuming cases, we will urge the consultant to speed up their work. For underperforming consultants, we will step up the spot checks of their work. When needed, we issue warning letters and adverse performance reports so that they can improve their performance and fix their problems. Over the past 3 years, the Joint Office issued 54 warning letters and 2 adverse reports to underperforming consultants. Those consultants have improved their performance ever since. Fixing the water seepage problems in the flat are the responsibility of the owners concerned. Still, the government attaches importance to support for owners. So the government is looking to prepare a list that will be made public. This list will contain individuals who wish to provide testing and repair services along with the reference prices that will help people find the suitable or authorized persons. We also have different loan schemes. Under the URA, we have the Building Maintenance Grant Scheme for needy owners. Under the BD, we have the Building Safety Loan Scheme. The FEHD and the BD also have clips on their website of the water seepage problem and also the social media platforms of public web market. I look forward to hearing members' views. I will give a response in due course. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Mr. Kenneth Lau. Thank you, Deputy President. I think the most effective way of tackling water seepage problem is to identify its source. However, it has caused a lot of nuisance to members of the public, according to the reply to an oral question raised by Mr. Kwok Wai-keung in February this year. In 2024, 47,000 water seepage complaints were recorded, comparing to just 29,000 plus in 2015. The figure has gone up by 60%, and we have an aging building stock in Hong Kong. So this issue is really close to the heart of a lot of members. Now, I have been receiving complaints about the water seepage problems in my neighborhood as well, and the victims have not been able to resolve the problem for years, and they are the victims of nuisance. Now, the joint office has always received criticisms about their lack of effectiveness, and that more mature technologies have been introduced in recent years, including infrared and microwave tomography. Now, the third stage is professional investigation, but it takes a very long time before the investigation will commence, including the moisture content threshold. Only when there is no reasonable doubt will the joint office issue a nuisance notice. And that means a lot of cases will fall between the cracks, and that is really not what the local residents would like to see. Now, as for waterproofing works, we have again heard about lots of disputes, such as the recent HOS intake. Water seepage problems are very prevalent, and they are not discovered until heavy downpours. According to media reports and news programs, very often we learn about the complaints of waterproofing works and their poor quality, and that the defects in pipe connections, etc. Now, Deputy President, even leveraging on advanced technologies, we may not be able to tackle water seepage, as it is very difficult to identify its source. However, we can do something about regulation of waterproofing works. I have some suggestions. Now, the joint office has been in operation for more than 20 years, and they have accumulated sufficient experience. And in fact, after turning off the water tap, they will check the water meters and then triage different cases, and they will focus on serious cases, and that with new testing methods we can shorten the time of investigation. Second point, I agree that a clear technical standards and fee schedules should be provided. So I absolutely support what's set out in the motion. For companies with good reputation, if they take up the relevant projects, we can turn to a preventive approach and stop water seepage from happening. The government should take reference from the URA's approach, and that a rating system should be put in place so that there will be more information for members of the public in choosing the relevant services. Now, this is not just a technical issue. Water seepage relates to people's livelihood. We need to reform the mechanism for tackling water seepage problems. For example, we should regulate contractors, and we should also set up a mechanism to help identify the source and shorten the time of maintenance and repair, so as to enhance the sense of bliss and happiness for the people, and allow the government to show commitment in solving livelihood problems. As also made Dr. Tik Chi-yun, water seepage seems to be a trivial problem, but it has far-reaching implications on people's standard and quality of living, as well as the safety of their lives and their properties. Now, many members have been handling various complaints to no avail. And for private housing owners, tenants, in particular owners of aged buildings, there are many problems surrounding where responsibilities lie, and that many owners do not receive adequate help. According to the JO's statistics, some 40,000 cases are received every year about water seepage, but half of these cases have not even reached the investigation stage. Every year, only 14,000 cases are concluded, and among them, less than 50% could identify the source of seepage. So it's really disappointing. Now, the joint office relies on owners' initiative in solving the problem, and owners are so helpless that they just repeatedly lodge complaints. In order to tackle the problem effectively, I have the following suggestions. Now, the government should amend legislation to give more powers to the joint office to take enforcement action. The joint office should be empowered to undertake repair and recover costs from the relevant owners. There should also be a sanction mechanism to penalize non-compliant units to increase deterrence. Advanced testing technologies should be introduced, such as infrared and microwave tomography, into the standard checking procedures so as to expedite the identification of source of water seepage, and that resources should be focused on providing training for the relevant technical professionals and extensive application of the technology so as to enhance efficiency. Now, there should be flexibility in setting the threshold of moisture content. It should not be set at 35%. We should have regard to the actual circumstances. For concrete spalling, molding, and discoloring, a flexible approach should be taken. The office should not just turn down complaints for not reaching the required threshold. A dedicated unit should be set up under the joint office to tackle complex complaints or repeated complaints to make sure that we can stem up the problem. This can help streamline the procedures and enhance the efficiency of the office's operation. Now, this is a livelihood issue. We should make improvements as quickly as possible. When it comes to water seepage problems, I can't help but think of numerous names: Eric, Mui Mui, Sam Sam, Along, Gawai, Daigo, etc., etc. Now, they have been helping the community tackle water seepage problems over the years, and I'd like to put this on record in this council. We all acknowledge your efforts. I'd like to speak in support of the motion, and I thank members for their support. Mr. Stanley Lee. Deputy President, I'd like to speak on a motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage problems. I thank Mr. Ben Chan for moving this motion. I support this motion. It gives us an opportunity for an in-depth discussion here. I am returned by direct election of geographical constituencies, and like many other members, I have received a lot of complaints about water seepage. There is a huge backlog because of the aging building stock in Hong Kong. Now, as mentioned by other members, the current mechanism is flawed in a sense that it takes a long time for an investigation to commence, and it takes a long time to go through the procedures. There are also problems surrounding the thresholds, such as a moisture content. Must we be so rigid as to stick to a single threshold? Can we now add a dimension to this matter? For example, whether water seepage affects the quality of life. From my experience, I can say that the government has been making a lot of efforts. The government has also introduced different testing technologies such as microwave tomography and infrared tomography in the investigation process. However, there is a manpower shortage with more buildings in Hong Kong and more cases received. We need to increase manpower as well. Now, I was a district councillor. I think it is a good idea for district councillors to work together, but district councillors are not equipped with the moisture testing gadget, so to speak. So perhaps the government can work with district councillors cases can be referred so that members of the public will feel how much we care about them. Now, I think very often the complainants are concerned about their voices not being heard. They want their complaints to be heard. They don't care so much as to how much time it takes to process the complaint. So this is food for thought for you. Another observation is that sometimes when there is a water seepage problem involving units upstairs and downstairs, the loss adjuster may be involved. I think we need to rethink the approach. For example, I heard from my colleagues that whoever approaches the notaries first may, in the end, win the case. So, does it really help in ensuring impartiality and fairness? Does it help in enhancing efficiency? Because at the end of the day, we're not here to help members of the public file claims at the small claims tribunal. But this is something I often do as a member representing a geographical constituency. I help local residents fill in forms for the case to be taken to the small claims tribunal. So perhaps we should streamline the approach because the buildings in Hong Kong are aging fast. We need additional manpower. There'll be financial implications, of course. I think we would all understand. Before finding the perfect solution, we can just work on improving the existing mechanism. For members of the public, again, I know that what they care about. They just want their case to be followed up on by someone. But of course, in the end, if we're able to identify the source of water seepage, then all the better. Water seepage seems to be a trivial problem. It affects directly people's quality of life, their living environment, and the safety. I support the motion.
Mr. Vincent Chang. Thank you, Deputy President. Water seepage in buildings in Hong Kong is a long-standing problem. According to the government, in the past few years, the Joint Office received a lot of cases. 47,000 cases in 2024, and the figure is on the rise. 68% of the cases were dealt with within 90 days. On the surface, this seems good, but actually, comparing with the previous 5-year level, the ratio is more or less the same. This reveals that no improvement has been made. There is still room for improvement. For residents affected by water seepage, they live in fear. That is because there may be dangers to structural safety of the buildings, financial losses, and so on. This is exactly the problem that the government cannot ignore. I thank Dr. Ben Chen for moving the motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage. In the motion, it is mentioned that the leadership role of the BD should be strengthened, as well as the establishment of a professional registration system for waterproofing works and the introduction of simplified judicial procedures, as well as the use of advanced testing in order to identify the source of water seepage. I go along with this direction. Oftentimes, we received quite a lot of cases in relation to water seepage. I'd like to share some of them with you. The JO sent personnel to conduct inspection in relation to ceiling seepage. But probably the equipment at that time wasn't used. That's why the moisture content in the air wasn't as high as 35%. Then the investigation was called off. That is actually not quite fair, as it didn't reflect the actual situation in reality. We need to make good use of more advanced technologies. When the moisture content is as high as 20%, seepage symptoms could be seen. This affects the living environment. Will the administration consider lowering the threshold? After all, the standard of 35% was set 2 decades ago. Is there any room for adjustment? As for 3 new buildings, residents have been plagued by the problem of water seepage for a decade or so. Some residents couldn't get a hold of the owner of the upper floor unit. Some investigations were cut off because of the very same reason as well. This shows a lot of 3 new buildings find it difficult to resolve water seepage problems. It is difficult for them to get a hold of the owner of the upper floor unit. That's exactly why we need the mechanism of case managers in order to follow up on relevant cases. Regarding subdivided units, recently the Council has passed the Basic Housing Units Bill. I have seen cases in subdivided units with water seepage problems. I went to an SDU and then the occupant of the upper floor unit simply asked me to contact the owner of the unit, and we were given the runaround as a result. Well, the owner of the subdivided unit didn't have the intention to solve the problem, as they themselves didn't live in that unit. I talked to the administration, and I believe there should be better safeguards for people living in basic housing units. The problem of water seepage affects the quality of life as well as social harmony. Some buildings are dilapidated, and that exacerbates the problem of water seepage. The government should face this problem squarely. The government should also review the use of different tests in order to enhance the efficiency of handling water seepage. The government should protect the public and ensure that they have a good living environment. Thank you. I so submit. Dr. Lo Wai-Kwok. Thank you, Deputy President. I speak in support of Dr. Ben's motion. No livelihood issue is a trivial one. Water seepage problems affect the quality of life of members of the public. They may lead to public health risks as well as financial losses and neighborhood bickering. This affects social harmony. Recently, the number of reports has been on the rise. From 2022, 40,000 cases, and recently we have seen the figures increasing to 47,000 cases. Recently, we have seen a backlog of 10,000 odd cases. We need to tackle the problem of water seepage, and we also need to overhaul the water seepage handling mechanism. At present, we rely on the owner of the upper floor unit to resolve the problem. The Joint Office should be overhauled in order to improve its efficiency. With the intervention of contractors, consultancies, consultant companies, the entire process takes a long time. Some tenants are unwilling to cooperate. All these factors have made it difficult for the problem to be solved. This has led to a heavy backlog of cases. There's a lack of active intervention. It is not easy to identify sources of water seepage. For traditional testing methods, it takes a long time, and it's not guaranteed to identify the sources. I advocated the use of technologies to identify the sources of water seepage. Recently, infrared thermography and microwave tomography have been introduced to look into these cases. The use of these tests has been extended to the entire territory. This is good. Such technologies should be extended to the entire Hong Kong, and more efficient and more effective devices should also be used in order to reduce the time of the investigation into water seepage cases. This will reduce neighborhood disputes. There should also be a time limit imposed on the owner of the upper floor unit to handle water seepage problems. Otherwise, the government will have to step in and recover the costs afterwards. Water seepage problems affect social harmony. If the cases are taken to the court, this will take a long time, and this will also affect social harmony. That's why we have always encouraged the use of mediation. Recently, the Lands Tribunal has been providing the service of water seepage handling. There is also the scheme of participation by property management agents in tackling water seepage in residential buildings. These schemes have yielded quite good results. At the district level, there should be more publicity, and the public should understand more about the use of mediation in handling water seepage disputes. We need to get to the bottom of a problem when it comes to water seepage. The administration needs to adopt a two-pronged approach. On the one hand, we need to strengthen legislation, and on the other hand, we also need to make better use of engineers in order to solve the problem. At present, we invoke CAP 132, the PHMSO, to deal with water seepage disputes. A relevant bill has been passed recently. Public officers are allowed to enter premises for a longer period of time and beyond a particular time. For non-compliance with nuisance order, the penalty will be increased. The penalty has been increased. The administration has introduced the approach of intervention first, cost recovery later. The administration should work with the CIC as well as the relevant professional bodies to explore the establishment of a professional registration system for waterproofing works. There should also be a standardized procedure and quality benchmark for waterproofing works. We need to get to the bottom of the problem and nip problems in the bud. This will help us improve the quality of life for members of the public. Thank you. I so submit Deputy President, Mr. Tommy Chang. Thank you, Deputy President. I speak in support of Dr. Ben Chen's motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage. In the past few years, I was rarely involved in water seepage matters. However, in bedroom, when there's no light, no air conditioning in summer, I have been affected by this problem for a year or so. That is my personal experience. The owner of the upper floor unit was contacted by the administration, but then they said that they weren't inside the unit. They didn't let public officers enter the unit. This problem had plagued me for a year or so. I conducted a color water test and my case was brought to a close somehow. Sometime later, once again, the circuit breakers tripped. Then the case was reopened by the administration. Something interesting happened. They brought along with them a device. They activated the device and they could immediately locate the source of water seepage. The problem was handled and dealt with right away. At that time, I asked the Joint Office what the device was. There was just one device for a handful of districts. Well, if it's just about money, just tell us. That was indeed a very effective device. That's why, in the policy address this year, it made reference to the water seepage problems. Technologies are used to expedite the identification of water seepage sources and this will help hold the people responsible to account. I'm glad to see that the government will increase the number of new testing technologies in order to make sure that there will be sufficient devices to handle different water seepage disputes in Hong Kong. As I mentioned just now, I have personal experience when it comes to the use of these advanced devices. With these devices, the responsibility can be pursued and those causing the problems could be held to account. Well, I can see a beaming smile on the secretary in the chamber. In the past 25 years or so, in my career in politics, the FEHD, the AFCD, and the EPD well, in the past few years, the results couldn't have been more outstanding. That's why I thank the director and I thank you for your collaboration and assistance rendered. When you're in the council, you can treat all members of the public just like the way you treated me. For OSA, I'm glad that you can conduct this way. And for Harry Krabs, I'm glad that we can see Harry Krabs once again in Hong Kong. I hope that you can help us with the sewage additional charges for the commercial sector. Well, I hope that you will use a new figure instead of the old one. All along, we want importance to be attached to games and poultries. I hope the gourmet paradise could be further enhanced. Thank you.
Madam Deputy, I support Dr. Ben Chen's motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage problems. Water seepage is a long-standing issue affecting people's quality of life. This problem is worsening. So we have the Joint Office. The Joint Office leaves much to be desired. This year's policy address has something to say about this. It vows actions to fix water seepage. Over the years, I've been following the performance of the Joint Office. In 2018, I said it took too long for the Joint Office to investigate cases. Those investigations failed to identify the sources of seepage, so I questioned the performance of the office. In 2020, I put in another question. I asked for a full review of the Joint Office's performance. Last year, I also put in a question on the citywide problem of seepage. This year, the government shows it is facing up to the problem. I can see the government's resolve. I welcome this. I see two directors of bureaus here. I know they are committed to resolving the problem. They work on leaky pipes. They work on smart water supplies. I understand the secretaries here understand what I want to say. It's about smart water supplies and leaky pipes. The government has done everything it can to deal with leaky pipes. We have more than 8,000 kilometers of water mains. And we're trying to reduce the leakage rate from double-digit to single-digit area. Now, previously we're talking about public mains. Here we're talking about the pipes between private flats. So the government can leave the matter to those owners. This is a matter about people's well-being. As I see it, it's also a mental health issue. In the cases I have worked on, I can see that water seepage takes a toll on people's mental health because this is a long-standing issue. When the problem goes on, no one does anything about this, the resident living downstairs suffers. So this is about people's well-being. This is also about mental health. So this problem warrants follow-up actions. People have to pay out of their own pocket to fix these problems. It would be good if the government could set up a fund to deal with it. So as other members have said, the government should step in to fix the problem first, and then we find out who's responsible. Identifying the source is hard. You may have to wait for the case is closed, and then extra resources come along, you reopen the file. That may happen to certain cases, but what happens when you cannot find the culprit? So the government has the duty to provide some sort of support. And let's also prioritize the cases we step in to fix the most serious cases first. I know there's free mediation. Some neighbors fall out with their neighbors. Mediation would do little good. And even with mediation, people have to pay out of their own pocket, so there's a resource issue. Water seepage brings us to our aging building stock issue, and this is also a long-standing problem. So the public can chip in, and the government should also contribute towards such a fund, so that we first deal with the most urgent and most serious cases. And that's what a responsible government should do. The policy address this year also mentions the AI efficacy enhancement team. So on smart water initiatives and also this joint office, can we use artificial intelligence to help us with that work? That's what AI can do. This can also raise the joint office's efficiency. Thank you. Mr. Holdenshaw. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I thank Dr. Ben Chen for his motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage problems. I support the motion. At the district level, we came across cases of water seepage. Local residents told us that the joint office couldn't do anything. Tests were done, but they couldn't identify the source of the water seepage. They couldn't tell for sure that the suspected source was the real source of seepage. So cases went to the joint office, and then no further follow-up action could be taken. We came across many such cases ourselves. And then a new effort was made, the law was amended. Now, at least, we have empowered law enforcement officers to enter the premises involved. So this is for the most serious cases. This works. Now, how do we identify the source of the water seepage? The threshold is 35% in terms of moisture. You use infrared technology to help you identify the source. Now, since infrared is tried and tested, can we simply adopt this at a larger scale? Past cases went like this. Officers came in, they checked the leakage, but the threshold wasn't met, so case closed. Now, new technology can help us find the source, and that will resolve the problem. So this is something that merits consideration. On resolving water seepage problems, some members brought up 3 new buildings, or old buildings. In those cases, building structure is the problem. But I want to focus on issues involving just individual flats. dealing with such problems can be tricky. We'll leave aside lawsuits. Let's just talk about mediation. The mediator cannot give professional advice to either party. In that case, how can mediation work? Support is needed for the parties so that they know what their options are. So can the joint office give support? Some sort of support needs to be given to the parties instead of just letting the parties leave the matter to the mediator. Mr. Stanley Lee also brought up the Small Claims Tribunal. When people want to file claims, they prefer the Small Claims Tribunal. But here's something to consider. This tribunal only gives you pecuniary awards. No specific performance can be granted. That only happens at the district court. So the Small Claims Tribunal does not give you the perfect relief. So the Small Claims Tribunal is only about money. How do we get the other side to perform a certain action? That's something people will have to think about. So I thank Dr. Ben Chen for this motion so that we can think about this. We have amended the law. Officers now get greater powers. We also have infrared technology. So I hope all these measures can come together to help us better address water seepage problems. Mr. Chen Kin-po. Thank you, Madam Deputy. We're getting more and more old buildings. The joint office got 40,000 cases in 2022. The case count rose to more than 47,000 cases last year. Now we have seen some cases, professionals were involved, and they helped those people address the water seepage problem. Water seepage affects people's quality of life and building safety. This problem warrants attention. I thank Dr. Ben Chen for moving this motion so that we can deal with this problem. My own office received a request for assistance. It involved an old building. The waterproof layer was damaged. Rainwater seeped in. And because it was an old building, ownership was fragmented. Help was nowhere to be found for the owner. In July this year, I put in a question at the council meeting. Under our existing law, normally, when rainwater seeps in through the ceiling or external wall and then there's leakage, or when there's a defective pipe, that does not count as a public health problem. And that sort of issue falls outside the scope of what the joint office can deal with under Cap 132 or the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance. So our existing mechanism for dealing with water seepage, such as the leakage of rainwater and potable water, we cannot deal with those problems. But people suffer when that kind of problem happens. So we should be expanding the functions of the joint office. All water seepage problems should count as nuisance so that we can deal with all water seepage problems. So it's not just about the seepage of foul water. We rely on moisture tests and also dye tests, as well as the straight spraying of water as ways to test for water seepage. But those testing methods come with limitations. Those tests take too long to run and it's hard to identify the source. These conventional methods have their limitations. So this year, new technologies were involved. Microwave tomography was used to look at the internal structure and moisture of buildings. When needed, infrared thermography was also used The new technologies led to much greater efficiency and accuracy in testing, and that also shortened the time it takes to run tests, and it's also less disruptive than before. In some tricky cases, the residents involved are uncooperative. They refuse to let in the officers, so the people find themselves in an impasse. As a result, we amended our laws under the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill 2025. That we passed this law. The new law took effect in August this year. That was to deal with public health nuisance. Officers can enter premises not just from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but from 7 a.m. all the way to 10 p.m. This change brings much greater flexibility in law enforcement, so that investigations no longer get held up because of time, and now we have stiffer penalties for refusal. For non-compliance with those notices, the fine is $5,000, and for non-compliance with those orders and notices, the fines went up from $25,000 and $50,000 went up to $25,000 and $50,000 with daily fines for every day of non-compliance. Many water seepage problems remain outstanding, but with new technology, hopefully those problems can be resolved over time. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Mr. Chan Hock-Fong, Deputy President, as the saying goes, if you have been sick for long enough, you can be your own doctor. So on water seepage, as district councillors, I think we all have sufficient knowledge about it. Very often it has to do with the water seeping down from the ceiling, or from leaking pipes, or from the drainage system, or from bathtubs. Now, according to the source of water seepage, different departments will handle these cases. If it's water seeping from the rooftop, then it's the buildings department. If it's leaking pipes, water service supplies department. Drainage is FEHD. Very often these departments would just pass the buck around. The joint office may also intervene to handle the complaint. You may need to check with the upper floor tenant, and that will take a long time. Now, at the district level, for cases that I've come across, it usually takes 3, 4, or even 5 years. And you need to meet the moisture content threshold as well. Now, having dealt with these cases for a prolonged period of time, I know that very often if we see incessant dripping of water, then very often it has to do with the WSD. If it's water seepage that happens only when the tap is turned on, then it has to do with drainage. And if water seepage happens only during downpours, then it has to do with the external wall. So now with more experience, I can tell the source of water seepage as well. Whereas if we go through the statutory procedures, we need at least 3 months to half a year, and we also need the cooperation of the upper floor tenants. And it also depends on the weather. If the weather is dry, then you may not meet the 35% moisture content threshold. So I fully agree with what Mr. Ben Chan has suggested in his motion, that we need to streamline procedures. In fact, we have some devices available, such as those using infrared and microwave tomography technologies. I think the government should conduct large-scale procurement of the devices, because these are mature technologies. We can achieve at least 70 to 80% accuracy. So we should work on this before taking the next step to involve the upper floor neighbor. Now, after streamlining procedures and saving time, we should draw up some standard testing procedures. It's just like a checklist for you to tick boxes, and that we can just rely on this checklist and tell the upper floor tenant that we're 80% sure that water seepage comes from your flat, and this can help streamline the procedures and minimize impact on the lower floor tenant. Now, the third point is that we should help compile reports for the purpose of mediation, let alone filing claims, because when it comes to litigation, different consultants may prepare various testing reports, and it may be confusing for the court or the tribunal. So we should standardize the testing reports so that the matter can be determined by the tribunal more efficiently, and that the affected tenants will not have to suffer so much. So I support Mr. Ben Chen's motion. Mr. Chen Yong. Thank you, Deputy President. Thank you, government officials. I strongly support Mr. Ben Chen's motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage problems. In my view, we need to enhance quality, speed, and efficiency in tackling water seepage. Now, the government's joint office has made a lot of efforts. Still, this is a pain point that we fully appreciate. It's like having a toothache. If you don't do something about the decaying tooth, it will only exacerbate the pain that you suffer. So we need to quicken our pace to tackle the problem. And this is also very much a livelihood issue. Now, the chief executive, Mr. John Lee, has said that it is the government's ultimate goal to improve people's livelihood. And in this year's policy address, initiatives are put forward to streamline and refine the mechanism for tackling water seepage. We receive several 10,000 complaints every year. Water seepage affects numerous households. Despite setting a time frame for investigation, that is one of 90 days, we need to quicken our pace. If we could ascertain the source as early as possible, we can then take bold steps to resolving the problem. Now, Mr. Chan Hock Fong just now referred to different kinds of technologies, IT, MT, sauna, ultrasound, RFID, ultraviolet, etc., even drones. Despite these advanced technologies, we also need to consider making better use of, say, robots for detecting leaking pipes. Now, in Chinese mainland, we have different technologies to tackle the problem. Now, if you live in the downstairs and if you're a victim of water seepage, then you can be quite helpless. The only way out is to approach the upper floor tenant to solve the problem, and we need to tackle these serious problems because structural safety is at stake. For dilapidated buildings posing a risk, the government should intervene and conduct works before recovering the costs from private owners. Only by pulling out the decaying tooth will we be able to stop the pain. The other point is about response to complaints. A one-stop unit should be set up involving different government departments, especially for serious cases. Just conduct all the checks in one go, because if bleeding continues, you need to stop bleeding as quickly as possible. The serious case teams should be set up. Different government departments should chip in. Sufficient authority should be provided. Action should be taken first before recovering the cost of remedy. I think this would definitely be welcome by members of the public. This council is able to enhance efficiency. Because of that, we shouldn't need to wait for 90 days. I hope that we can further enhance efficiency in tackling water seepage problem, so as to lift the victims out of their plight so that their living environment can be improved. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Deputy President. We fully support Mr. Ben Chan's motion on tackling water seepage. Water seepage is really a pain in the neck. There is no quick fix to this problem. There is no Band-Aid solution to water seepage. Water seepage can be a protracted problem. I welcome Mr. Ben Chan or Dr. Ben Chan's motion, and I understand the government will introduce a series of measures, including the use of advanced technologies such as infrared tomography, and that an order can be issued for the owner to take remedial action and inspection within a specified time frame. Costs can be recovered, etc. From the owner's perspective, especially owners with water seepage happening in their respective units, how were they able to engage a competent contractor to provide quality services? Because, well, I came across this case. For example, the owner might wish to wait for the next downpour for the test to be conducted in order to identify the source. This may involve either the rooftop or a leaking pipe, etc., and that this may cost several $10,000. So owners are deterred. They'd rather wait for the government to step in or wait for the government to prosecute them. They're deterred by the costs involved, and that is why we need to ensure that quality services are provided by the contractors to support this mechanism, because, say, the works involved may cost the owners $30,000 or even $100,000. In the end of the day, the owner might just wish to sell the flat and leave there for good. So something should be done to monitor the work of small contractors. And Dr. Ben Chan also mentioned the issue of outsourced consultants. Again, this is very important. I'm not going to repeat his point. We need to put in place an incentive system to make sure that penalties are meted out for those with poor performance, and that a reward should be given to those faring well. The government should also quicken its pace. And now I'd like to refer to what Mr. Vincent Chang said. He came across this case. This tenant lived on the top floor of a building. This person is blind, and his flat is also subject to water seepage because of poor waterproofing on the rooftop, and that is a 3-new building. An owners' corporation has to be formed first before a resolution is passed for works to be carried out, and that may mean an endless wait until the mandatory building inspection scheme chooses this building for mandatory inspection, and in the end this may lead to the owners being prosecuted. So there are various causes of water seepage, such as poor drainage, poor building design, leaking pipes, and this may affect every household. Some buildings are bound by the DMCs. They may not have owners' corporations. There may be other restrictions. So we need to make sure that effective services can be provided to those in need.
Mr. Gary Chan. Thank you, Deputy President. I speak in support of Dr. Ben Chan's motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage. In Hong Kong, buildings are aging. This is a very serious problem. Every year, the government received a total of 40,000 plus cases in relation to water seepage. This problem is a long-standing one. Just now, Mr. Stephen Ho gave us some examples. I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you the cases I myself have received. Sometimes the sources of water seepage couldn't be identified. This doesn't just affect social harmony, but it has a far-reaching impact as well. For a unit in the middle floors of a building, it is found that that unit causes water seepage, but then the owner isn't willing to repair the unit. This has caused two serious drains problems. In the end, the management company switched off the switch for water. This didn't just affect the unit concerned, but for the entire block, water supply was suspended, not for a day, but for half a year. The reason is that the owner of the unit concerned wasn't willing to let people enter the premises for inspections. This will even lead to a burst pipe. Therefore, we need to identify the source of water seepage, and we also need to get to the bottom of the problem. For more straightforward cases, of course, we can ask repairmen to help us with the repairs. Or financial assistance can be provided to help us. However, what about cases in which the owner of the unit isn't willing to let the public officers enter the premises? This year, we have passed the Public Health and Municipal Services Amendment Bill. This has expedited the efficiency of the handling of water seepage. This is indeed good. However, what about when the owner of the unit has genuine economic or financial difficulties? In Singapore, there is a piece of legislation targeting water seepage. The owner of the upper floor unit has the responsibility for handling the water seepage incident and has the responsibility for locating or identifying the source of water seepage. The Singaporean government has come to the notice of the problem of aging buildings. That's why they have a scheme. The government is responsible for half of the cost of the repair of the unit, and the owner shoulders the other half of the cost. Some may say that it's not fair because public money is used, but in any event, this is at least better than no repairs being done. I suggest that the government draw reference from this scheme. That's why I suggest extending the relevant scheme, and for buildings that are older than 30 years, there should be subsidies provided to these buildings when it comes to the repair of the buildings. This will help us expedite the handling of water seepage. I'd like to cite this example for the Secretary and the Undersecretary's reference. Thank you. I so submit. Dr. Hui Simon Lee. Thank you, Deputy President. Water seepage problem is a long-standing one in Hong Kong. At present, I'm following up on two cases. In the first one, the upper floor unit is confirmed to cause water seepage. A letter has already been sent to the unit. However, the owner of the unit concerned isn't willing to follow up on the case. The owners aren't in Hong Kong. Therefore, they don't use water in the unit. Hence, no problem revealed. In the end, 7 years have passed, and the case had been closed. The investigation has come to nothing. In the other case, the Joint Office has conducted investigation and has already confirmed the liability. But because the Joint Office doesn't have any lawful authority or legal authority, that's why the victim couldn't hold the unit on the upper floor to account. The Joint Office is the office responsible for providing coordination. The investigation findings don't have any legal binding effect. This is actually a very important issue. The Joint Office is responsible for investigating water seepage cases. However, in accordance with existing legislation, the reports provided by the JO don't have any legal binding effect. This is a loophole. The property owner, tenant, or property management companies don't have to respond to the reports. In other words, the problem couldn't be solved for, say, a few years or even a longer period of time. As I said, for the first case, and as Mr. Stephen Ho said just now, there are some 3 new buildings in Hong Kong. The case that I've been following up on is a private housing estate in Hong Kong. The families affected need to prepare water buckets, and they also need to conduct color water tests and prepare a lot of different buckets in order to conduct tests to identify the sources of water seepage. Let's not talk about the possible impacts on electrical appliances. The problem of water seepage has impacted on the life of people in Hong Kong. The costs are high. If members of the public want to hold the person concerned to account, they will have to do so at their own costs. In one case that I've seen, the person involved spent a total of $200,000, but the problem still hasn't been solved yet. There have been disputes in the community which affected social harmony. All these have translated into a social problem. We need to start from the perspective of the system and technologies in order to eradicate this problem. First of all, we need to give legal effect to the investigation report of the JO. There should be legislative amendments to empower the JO to carry legal power. The investigation reports should be allowed to be submitted to the court as evidence. Next, we need to draw reference from the small claims tribunal model to provide a simplified or streamlined mechanism to handle disputes. If we can make good use of arbitration, the time and costs of members of the public could be reduced. There should also be better support, be it prevention or technology provided by the administration. We need to target agent buildings, and we need to recommend waterproofing technologies in order to keep the problem in check. A lot of legislators are already following up on cases. I so submit. Thank you, Deputy President. Ms. Chen Yutming. Thank you. I speak in support of Dr. Benchen's motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage. As many members have said just now, the problem of water seepage affects a lot of members of public. This problem is a pain in the neck for a lot of tenants and owners of units. Well, the person affected will have to take money out of their own pocket to entrust a loss adjuster to carry out investigation and solve the problem. If the owner of the upper floor unit isn't willing to admit liability, then all the efforts will go in vain. Now, the Joint Office is responsible for investigating these cases, but the time taken is long. From the moment when a report is made by a member of the public to the conduct of color water tests by the JO, one may have to wait for 6 to 8 weeks or even a longer period of time for the JO to conduct investigation. Then, in between, the person concerned will have to face different issues such as boiling concrete from the ceiling, as well as other issues. For restaurants, salons, or other establishments, the problem could get even more serious. Persistent water seepage doesn't just affect public hygiene, but it also affects the appliances or the equipment of the premises. They may have to close down their stores for a period of time, and this affects their business. Buildings in Hong Kong are aging. We are facing the problem of water seepage. We're at our wit's end. There is really nothing we can do apart from the existing mechanism. The latest policy address talked about streamlining the handling of water seepage problems. It is mentioned that different technologies need to be introduced in order to resolve the problems. The time taken will be shortened to about 2 weeks. I believe members of the public will welcome this suggestion, but we shouldn't just rely on testing itself. We need to get to the bottom of the problem, and we need to overhaul the mechanism for tackling water seepage. I agree that we need to strengthen the leadership role of the Joint Office when there is evidence pointing to water seepage, and when the owner of the upper floor unit isn't willing to admit liability, then powers should be given to the JO in order to resolve water seepage disputes. We should also leverage on the community network in order to resolve water seepage disputes. We need to make good use of mediation. Solving the problem of water seepage will also improve the safety of buildings. Thank you. I so submit.
Mr. Tony Tan, Mr. Deputy, our building stock is aging. Those buildings are falling into disrepair. We have poorly connected pipes, and that leads to water seepage. In 2024, we got 47,000 cases at the Joint Office, up 5% year on year, or up nearly 20% from the 2022 level. Water seepage causes distress for the people involved. Many people have personal experience of that. An understanding owner who lives upstairs can take timely action. Even then, that takes time, and that affects the people living downstairs. And that's only in fortunate cases. In other cases, less fortunate cases, the person living upstairs may be uncooperative or obstructive, so you cannot enter the premises, you cannot pinpoint the source of the seepage, and then the seepage goes unresolved. In 2024, cases where the source of seepage was identified and the nuisance notice was issued amounted to just 5,000 or so cases. That's just over 10% of the new reports received, so that points to poor results. And that's why so many people are upset about the performance of the Joint Office. I understand the Joint Office and its consultants are under great stress. They have their plates full, even then they got lots of complaints. But because of the problems in our law, and we have this poorly defined responsibilities and powers. Officers cannot just enter the premises, and we still resort to low-tech options such as colored water tests, which is also fraught with problems. So that means the tests take a long time. The policy addressed this year proposes greater use of technology to speed up the identification of the sources of water seepage and pinpointing the parties culpable. The owners involved will have to investigate and fix the problems by deadline. Otherwise, the government will step in and recover the fees afterwards. That will get the building owners to fulfill their responsibility. The government will also promote the use of mediation to resolve disputes between neighbors. This proposal merits our support. These ideas were proposed by the architecture, landscaping, and surveying and property management sectors. The motion also proposed a bonus system as an incentive for consultants to do better. We support this. Consultants can play a role. Putting results before procedure also matters. I have also called on the government to make greater use of professional property management companies in resolving disputes between residents caught up in water seepage problems. When people see water seepage, they don't turn to the joint office as the first port of call. Those people turn to the property management. An effective property management company can reduce the workload of the joint office. The Property Management Services Authority issued a good practice for addressing water seepage and drippings from air conditioners. A guideline can make a difference. Training for property management staff can also play a role. So I call on the government to work with the Property Management Services Authority on addressing the problem of water seepage, which affects people's quality of life. I so submit. I support the motion. Ms. Nixie Lam. Water seepage is a long-standing problem. It's a bane of life for many people. When I first entered politics, I was a district councillor of Chunwan. There were many private flats in that district. Those were older buildings. Water seepage was common. I want to share some of the worst cases I saw. When I entered a flat, I looked at the ceiling of the toilet. The concrete fell. You could see the steel reinforcement bars, but there was a false ceiling, preventing the ceiling from falling to the floor. And when the seepage happened in the wall, you can see the water dripping from even the lift. So can we track the water seepage from 10 years ago when that happens? In my case, those people, those owners were responsible folks. They acknowledged responsibility. They acknowledged what happened 10 years ago. That was good. But what happens way more often is that the person living upstairs is uncooperative. The case drags on, the problem goes unresolved over the years. So can we do better to speed up the processing of the cases? The joint office has a tough job to do because they're dealing with tricky work. Technology is another aspect of the problem. Back in 2012, I was elected as a district councillor. For sure, new technologies have emerged, and those are affordable technologies. Have we looked out for new technologies instead of just the moisture detectors? Have we moved on from just the dye tests? Now, analyzing data also plays a role in the process. We have many old buildings. By 2046, we will see an extra 40,000 buildings over 30 years old. Those are prone to water seepage. Now, for the buildings built in the earlier years, the concrete used to build those buildings was mixed with seawater, so that makes those buildings prone to water seepage. So addressing these problems warrants a detailed approach. We need technology, we need the law to allow officers to enter the flat, and finally, we need big data to support the effort. Dealing with water seepage cases can take anywhere between a few months to more than a decade. People living in those flats suffering from water seepage will suffer. Even for a healthy adult living in a moldy flat will suffer because their respiratory system will be affected. So how do we approach the problem? Can we have dedicated units for the worst cases? District councillors and care team members have the worst cases. Can we give our immediate attention to those serious cases? And we also know where those buildings are, and I'm talking about buildings with cement mixed with seawater. The public would like the government and Ecology to address these problems. That's all I can fit in my 5 minutes, but I hope our officials can give thought to my ideas. Ms. Jofi Chan. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The FTU has been following up on water seepage problems. We have received requests from Kwai Ching and Chunwan. They complained about the slow progress of the joint office. Their daily lives are affected. So we have been pushing for a reform of the functions of the joint office. We would like improvement in the institutions and the technology. Our work report has dealt extensively with water seepage, and that shows the importance we attach to this problem. In Chunwan and Kwai Ching, we conducted a survey. We got many requests for assistance. We got requests from tenant purchase TPS flats and private flats. We met with the Buildings Department and the FEHD. We welcome the government's responsive approach to the problem. The government will bring in new technology. There will be better facilities to ensure greater quality and accuracy in testing results. We also call for a lower moisture threshold for investigation so that we can deal with cases faster. Now, to implement the reform, we held a seminar. We invited the government and industry professionals. We got everyone together to discuss how we can do better. They shared insights into mediation and different solutions. We should look at the functions of the joint office. Let's compress the time it takes for investigation, and we should also investigate mistakes. We need a lower moisture threshold. We need greater flexibility in the approach. We need better coordination between the FEHD and the BD. We need faster processing for the TPS flats. We need new technology to enhance our devices for water seepage. The joint office adopted a new approach. After the stage 1 investigations, stages 2 and 3 will proceed in tandem. that will speed up the process. We have been pushing for an expansion of this approach to the entire city. Technology can bring us faster results so that we can address the problem affecting people. The FTU, we push for this full reform of the joint office so that we can stamp out water seepage as a problem. Now I have another suggestion, because and this suggestion will involve another bureau, and that is the ITIB. They're not here, but on my idea, I've been sharing my thoughts with that bureau too. The policy address proposes an AI efficacy enhancement team. The chief executive has also highlighted 1823 as an area where reform is due. Reforming this space can help us provide a tailored approach to water seepage. I took part in a seminar held in Beijing about how they dealt with such problems. They also have a hotline, and they also take an approach where local issues are resolved locally. They are taking an innovative approach where they use AI and big data to improve city governance. They have the monthly bring up mechanism. They use big data to identify frequently arising problems. That approach improves administrative efficiency. That also serves as a model for smart urban governance for around the world. So let's learn from this monthly alert approach from Beijing. We should try this out in Hong Kong. Let's look at the frequently raised complaints. This approach can apply not just to water seepage, but also to burst water mains or malfunctioning street lamps. We can also apply this to environmental hygiene issues. So we fix the problems before they worsen. We nip the problems in the bud. I hope the government can give thought to my ideas. I support the motion.
Dr. So Chong-ming. Deputy President, Hong Kong is a dense international city. Water seepage in buildings, however, remains a long-standing nuisance to residents. It is a major pain point in our society. Many residents suffer from various nuisances such as concrete spalling, molding walls, structural safety issues. These problems eat into the living quality of our people. It also poses pressure to maintaining social harmony. Now, the government has set up the joint office to tackle water seepage, and yet it is not effective in solving the issue. Now, there are more and more criticisms. Now, there is an imminent need to reform the mechanism. So I thank Dr. Ben Chan for moving today's motion. The joint office is set up by the Buildings Department and the FEHD. For a long time, the joint office has been criticized time and again for its lack of efficiency. According to statistics in the past 3 years, on average, over 40,000 complaints were received per year, and this is a rising trend. For example, 45,000 cases were received in 2023. However, only 5,800 nuisance notices were issued. So that means a success rate of just 13%. The result is really disappointing. Many cases remain unresolved because of various problems. One cause is that the joint office is set up by 2 departments and they work in their own silos. There is a lack of clear division of work. These departments keep passing the buck This has led to protracted investigation. The Joint Office does not enjoy a lot of statutory powers. The Joint Office is unable to handle complex cases in time. The second cause is a structural problem of the buildings. Repair costs are high. Some owners are unwilling to cooperate. And this also poses a major issue to tackling the problem. And it's a convoluted pathway. If people wish to take the matter to court, it comes with high costs as well. So many residents are held stranded. I suggest empowering the Joint Office to take up a more pivotal role, with the Buildings Department being in the lead. The Buildings Ordinance should be amended to provide greater powers to the Joint Office to deal with water seepage problems that affect building structure. The Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance should be amended to empower the FHD to take enforcement action against a wider scope of cases, such as leaking pipes in the interior of buildings. The second suggestion is to set up a mediation mechanism that is credible. We should also promote online mediation. A community support network should be set up to help promote dispute resolution through mediation. Now, a mechanism similar to the Small Claims Tribunal should be set up for dispute resolution, so that a straightforward and dedicated set of procedures can be put in place for resolving disputes. I so submit. Thank you, Deputy President. Mr. Kwok Wai-keung. Thank you, Deputy President. I thank Dr. Ben Chen for moving this motion. Now, water seepage is a livelihood issue. This is nothing trivial. Water seepage can have far-reaching implications. For the middle class, they may save up for their whole life in order to buy a roof over their head. Is the only luxury they have. Home ownership can also help them acquire wealth, or at least preserve wealth. Now, Deputy President, in the past 10 years, the number of buildings aged 50 years or above have reached 10,000, and it is expected to go up to 24,300 by 2043. So this is a staggering figure. I need to declare that I'm an NED of the URA. The URA, on a regular basis, rolls out some subsidy programs. However, these are not sufficient in meeting the demand. The URA already has a lot on its plate in urban renewal. It alone cannot catch up with the demand for urban renewal and rehabilitation. And that is why we need to adopt another strategy to extend the serviceable life of buildings and slow down the aging of buildings. This is the major challenge facing the government. Now, we are not concerned about the sheer wall being taken down or structural alteration, because the Buildings Department will definitely intervene immediately. However, water seepage is something else. It starts with a minor seepage, but it can exacerbate and blow up into a major problem. For example, I once visited the top floor of a building, and in fact, all the downstairs units suffer from water seepage. Even mushrooms grow by the side of the wall. In another case, at first water seepage remained really trivial, and then the matter dragged on for 8 to 10 years. In the end, even the structural safety of the building was at stake. Works had to be carried out, and that led to some really expensive maintenance costs and cost of litigation. In order to resolve this livelihood issue, we need to take a three-pronged approach. It should be prevention-based, and we should leverage on technology. We should also promote tripartite collaboration. On preventive works, as mentioned by other members, there should be regular inspection and maintenance. We should require skilled workers and mechanics to undergo training so as to raise awareness on water seepage problems. Now, the second point is to leverage on technologies. We all agree that technologies such as IT and MT should be more extensively applied. However, say if you receive numerous complaints coming from the same building about water seepage and that these are adjoining flats or upstairs, downstairs units, then the government should intervene and collect statistics as quickly as possible so as to reflect how extensive the problem is. The third point is to promote multi-party collaboration. We should work with owners as well as professionals. About half a year ago, the FTU conducted a seminar on water seepage. We wanted the government to join us as well. According to the Joint Office, in order to initiate prosecution, there is a very high threshold. You will need to collect evidence quite meticulously. However, I've also asked some professionals, if you want to take the case to the Small Claims Tribunal, the evidence required is not really extensive. So we should leverage on market forces and engage these professionals in order to tackle water seepage. Ms. Lillian Kwok. Thank you, Deputy President. I support Dr. Ben Chen's motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage problems. Along with Dr. Ben Chen, I was engaged in district work. I worked in Kwai Ching district. That is an area strewn with old buildings and tenement buildings, dozens of them. And as you know, when it comes to water seepage complaints, they entail really cumbersome testing procedures. We need to ask the WSD to turn off the tap or do a dye trace test, etc. Now we can make use of infrared tomography, and other members already talked about other more precise technologies such as microwave tomography. Well, we should give it a thought and apply infrared tomography more extensively. What is important is to resolve the problems together, and one of the major obstacles here is about dispute resolution. Dr. Ben Chen's motion refers to adopting simpler judicial procedures for handling water seepage disputes. I've come across these cases as well. Sometimes it's really difficult to clarify the responsibilities. Now, I can give you one example. For the waterproofing layer on the rooftop of buildings, it's actually a common area, but the rooftop is privately owned. And I tried to offer assistance, but this case remains unresolved because despite the serious water seepage on the top floor, the owner is unwilling to carry out repair works. So how should it be dealt with? In fact, we have amended CAP 344 and that the Home Affairs Department now plays a more prominent role with more powers. So perhaps the district office can send a staff to help mediate the problem. The next question is about unauthorized building works. Again, we've come across different cases involving unauthorized building works and illegal structures. There may be rusty nails, etc., leading to water seepage. Again, can we take a more simplistic approach in handling these issues? Now, there is the mandatory window inspection scheme. The technical professionals would look at the structure of the windows, but a lot of water seepage problems are actually caused by the rubber becoming hard. So that's another issue. Can we do something about the rubber surrounding this the window pane? The other point is about private ownership, and there's a difference between private housing and public housing. If it's public housing, we can get the housing department involved, whereas if it's private property, you can't ask the housing department to intervene. They won't be able to get entry. So, like other members said, the joint office should take up more responsibilities with more powers so that the government departments can, for example, issue warnings and demand inspections of the premises. Now, some members of the public are cooperative. They would like the officials to come in and check the situation as well. But very often, the joint office staff would knock off on the dot, and the timing is always wrong for inspections to be carried out. Another problem is about money. I've come across a case of a elderly singleton living in private property. He's not a CSSA recipient, and there is no financial means to tackle the problem. Anyway, this is a livelihood issue, an important one. We should intervene as quickly as possible and identify the source to allow people a sense of gain.
Dr. Starry Lee. Thank you, President. I thank Dr. Ben Chen for moving this motion so that we can discuss this issue in the Council. I believe water seepage issues are quite commonly seen by members or more experienced members in the Council. New initiatives were mentioned in the policy address. But we do need to look into this situation. We need to make breakthroughs in order to resolve this problem. This is a long-standing problem. Buildings in Hong Kong are aging quite rapidly. When a building ages, for sure, there are going to be more problems. Despite more resources being devoted to this issue, the situation isn't ideal. We are having a fiscal deficit at present. For water seepage issues in Hong Kong, private properties are very valuable assets, so it is unreasonable for owners not to be willing to spend money on fixing the problem. But this is exactly the problem that we're facing now. In my opinion, the government will have to come up with a sustainable solution in order to solve the problem. We have worked on solving the problem for years. Some people in the middle class related the problem of water seepage to me. Based on my experience, I told them most likely you wouldn't be able to identify the source of water seepage if you seek help from the JO, that is the joint office. You should have turned to the private sector. I believe the mechanism could be further enhanced. So I'd like to make some suggestions for the administration to consider. We need to provide more testing devices. We need more resources. If we can do so, of course, it's good. But if we can foresee a lot of water seepage cases in the future, should the government continue to shoulder the responsibility, or is there any other way out? Is it possible to entrust an NGO? We need to look for an NGO that charges reasonably. We need to identify the source of water seepage for these cases. We need a credible NGO. Otherwise, in some cases, when you seek help from a loss adjuster, when you can identify the source of water seepage from the upper floor unit, when the upper floor unit isn't satisfied, then that owner will seek yet another loss adjuster. Then it is a situation of he said, she said. This will lead us nowhere. That is exactly why we need an organization that can help us identify the source of water seepage. Of course, it'd be the best if the JO can do so. More often than not, the owner of the upper floor unit isn't willing to let you in their unit. If you need to apply for an order in order to enter the premises, then it will take a long time. So what can members of the public do? This is a realistic issue that we need to face. If the owner of the upper floor unit isn't willing to work with you, then you can't solve the water seepage issue. After we have obtained a water seepage report, at present I suggest people go to the small claims tribunal. But sometimes you will just be advised to go through mediation. We need a credible adjudicator to apportion the responsibility. Otherwise, this problem will continue to plague the government. Mr. Peter Xu, thank you, President. Water seepage problems affect a lot of different people in Hong Kong, including myself. A wall in my unit is all wet. The problem had been around for one clear month. We made telephone calls and we spent a lot of time arranging for personnel to visit the unit and to carry out repairs. It'd been a year or so, and the problem of spalling concrete from ceiling still remained. Water definitely flows downwards. Whenever there is water seepage, definitely it is attributable to the unit on the upper floor. When water flows downwards, it is possible that it is the unit on the upper floor that is affecting the unit above you. When it comes to procedures, you need to have a standardized procedure. You have the buildings department, you have the WSD. They make a couple of visits to your unit. And I myself, as a victim, feel annoyed as well. Why do you have to make arrangements for a couple of visits to my unit? When you conduct water tests, the FEHD conducts tests on one part, and the buildings department is responsible for conducting tests on another part. Why can't we centralize all the procedures? You can conduct tests on all parts. Say for the pipes and drains in the washroom, there may be problems with the pipes or drains in bathtub. For the floor slab in the washroom, there may be problems as well. For drains or pipes inside the wall, there could be problems, and you need to conduct tests all together at one time. You shouldn't make separate visits to one single unit. The victim of water seepage might feel annoyed as well. I understand the administration has already tried to simplify the procedures, but it's far from enough. The problem of water seepage is very serious in Hong Kong. So you need to make one single visit to a unit, and then you can already identify the source of water seepage. Then the owner of the upper floor unit will be willing to work with you. As I understand, penalty has already been heightened if the owner of the upper floor unit isn't willing to work with you. The second point of the motion is about the establishment of a professional registration system for waterproofing works. Well, I declare, I know quite well with waterproofing works as well. Of course, I support Dr. Ben Chen's motion, but if we need to draw up a policy, there are different practices in the trade. Each of them claims that they have an effective solution. So how can the administration tell us company A works or company B works? That is exactly why we need a standard set of procedures. If the trade couldn't come up with one single set of standards, how can the administration do so? In the market, there aren't effective waterproofing works that can be applied to all sections or all locations. Is there any time limit when it comes to identifying the source of water seepage? Well, I have to declare my interest as well. My friends asked me to help. Well, I think it is reasonable to set a time limit. So the administration needs to consider how they can improve the mechanism. The Liberal Party speaks in supports this motion. Thank you, Mr. Porte. Well, I believe for directly elected members, they know the situation very well. The situation is a widespread, common, serious, and people are at their wits' end as well. Legislators cannot help and they resort to the media. On the 13th of October, quite a lot of cases have been handled successfully. We do need to grapple with the problem. I read law myself. It is a case in 1866 or 1868 is a landmark case about water seepage. Nuisance could be used to bring a legal action to the person causing the water seepage, and strict liability can also be invoked in order to hold the person to account. Solving the problem takes a long time. When it comes to evidence, it's an issue as well. That's why some people would rather not to take the case to the court. The Joint Office already made a lot of improvements to the mechanism. We don't need to visit different departments in order to resolve these problems. The moisture content is set at 35%. It's an arbitrary figure. 1 or 30, 1 or 50. It's just an arbitrary figure. but there isn't any reason, any evidence to back it up. Just like the valedictory motion, there's no logic, and that's exactly why members of the public don't understand. The administration emphasizes this threshold. Private building, private landlords. That is the logic that the administration uses. But in Hong Kong, the middle class, they don't have any goodies. They don't enjoy any benefits apart from paying tax. Can the government help the middle class? For 100 cases, less than half of the cases will be handled by the government. Each case costs about $6,000. Why don't you subsidize the units, the owners of the units, to solve the problem? Take Laguna City as an example. We need to do a lot of groundwork for providing water seepage investigation services. For a case of $15,000, we can right away prepare a report. The other party might look for another report for themselves, but if you have an expert report, you can get the mediation process started. We spend a lot of resources on building Hong Kong into an international mediation center. But if we build ourselves into an international water seepage dispute resolution center, definitely that will bring to you a lot of cases. I go along with all the suggestions put forward by Dr. Ben Chen. At the end of the day, it's all about whether we have the resolve or not. Do we have the resolve to help the middle class? We need to stay attuned to public needs. We need to be pragmatic. We need to focus on mediation. We need to be pragmatic. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Acting Secretary for Development. President, once again I thank Dr. Ben Chen for moving the motion. I also thank the many members who have spoken. Members' comments will help us do a better job. A number of areas brought up by members have to do with the work of the Buildings Department. First, the time it takes to go through the process, the use of technology, our outsourcing system, monitoring of the works, and how we find suitable people to do the work, and support for building owners. As members have pointed out, many factors contribute to water seepage. This can be rainwater, foul water, or something else. The joint office consists of the Buildings Department and the FEHT. The joint office works with other departments. For different cases, we have different tools. We have the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance, Buildings Ordinance, Waterworks Ordinance. Based on the different situations, we take effective actions based on the case. Enhancing the procedure will help us speed up the work. That's why the policy address this year proposed such measures. To give you an example, in the past, Stage 1 and Stage 2 went to the FEHT. Stage 3 would go to the Buildings Department for inspection. So this whole process takes roughly 90 working days. Now, our proposal is to shorten the process by a third. So, enhancing the procedure can speed up the process. We have also other measures to fast-track the process. Now, when you have serious water seepage in terms of dripping from the potable water mains, the Joint Office refers the case to the Water Supplies Department right away. That also fast-tracks the process. Second, technology. As I said in my opening remarks, we start using the portable infrared devices even at stage 1, and then where it is technically possible, we use microwave tomography and infrared thermography for stages 2 and 3, but there are constraints, such as when there are tile finishes and false ceilings. Those prevent the use of technology, but where possible, we use the devices. The new technology gives us more accurate and faster results. If we stick to the traditional approach, we use the die, we have to go to the flat upstairs. But the microwave tomography devices will let us make a decision even when we're still in the flat downstairs, so that gives us faster results. The buildings department will keep looking out for technologies in building testing. Elsewhere, we will be bringing in technologies that work for Hong Kong to give us faster and more accurate results in dealing with water seepage. Now, on the external consultants, whether we can introduce bonuses. Those consultants are engaged by the government. They have to do their job. We have a mechanism to monitor them. For good performers, we do have rewards for them. Every time we decide whether to engage a consultant, we look at that consultant's past performance. So a good track record will help a consultant secure a future contract. So we have mechanisms to monitor their performance. We have annual reports, work meetings, and performance reports. We have pre-warning letters, we have warning letters, and we also give out adverse performance ratings. That's to get the consultant to shape up. Now, when a single consultant has multiple adverse performance ratings in a row, we can bar the consultant from bidding for our contracts for 3 to 12 months. We look at the ratings of a consultant over the past 3 years when we decide whether to grant a new contract to that consultant. So we have both sticks and carrots. We reward good performers and penalize underperformers. I also want to point out that the progress of investigation depends on many factors. There can be multiple sources of water seepage, or maybe there are unique circumstances. The water seepage may be continuous or sporadic. The owner also has to be cooperative. Some factors are beyond the control of the consultant. So we look at each case based on its own facts in deciding how we give the rating to the consultant to arrive at a fair rating. Now, on how do people tell who they should turn to fix the water seepage? We do have oversight on this side. A key partner is the Construction Industry Council. So they do have this regime. It's the Registered Specialist Trade Contractor Scheme for different contractors in different trades. One such trade is the waterproofing layers and waterproofing works, and that is part of the regime. We now have 300 registered companies in this category to help the public and building owners. The buildings department is talking to the industry. We're trying to compile a list of individuals who wish to provide such services. We will also put the fees up there so that people can look at the list and then they can hopefully find what they want. Now, on support for owners, building owners are primarily responsible for building maintenance and fixing water seepage. The government does give support. As I said, the URA has a subsidy scheme for owners in need. The buildings department also has the building safety loan scheme. These are examples of financial support for building owners in need so that they can undertake building maintenance and fix water seepage. So these are examples of government support. All in all, resolving water seepage requires a community consensus and collective effort. The current term government focuses on delivering real results. The Development Bureau and the Buildings Department will continue to support the measures proposed in the policy address to fix water seepage so that we create a better living environment for Hong Kong people. I so submit. Thank you.
Secretary for Environment and Ecology. President, once again I thank Dr. Ben Chen for moving this motion. I also thank members for their valuable views. First of all, quite a lot of members refer to the Chief Executive's policy address. They supported the enhanced pilot scheme for water seepage investigation procedures, as I mentioned, when water seepage occurs. That is due to the lack of repair and maintenance for the buildings on the part of owners. If there is proper communication and follow-up on water seepage investigation, the problem of water seepage could be resolved as soon as possible. This is exactly the reason why we launched the pilot scheme. Based on the experience of the Joint Office, water seepage is generally caused by the upper floor unit. Therefore, under the pilot scheme, we utilize technology to identify the source of seepage and require the upper floor owners to conduct testing or repairs within a specified time period. If they fail to do so, the GO will intervene, take further action, conduct detailed tests, and recover the investigation fees from the owner. This will prompt the upper floor unit owner to conduct tests as soon as possible. Then they won't have to wait until the government has the investigation report. To support the implementation of the pilot scheme, the Development Bureau and the Environment and Ecology Bureau provides information and financial assistance to owners in need, helping upper floor owners to conduct tests and resolve seepage disputes themselves. With regard to information, the government will collaborate with professional bodies to prepare information kits on water seepage detection and repairs. They will be uploaded to the websites of the JO. For financial support, the Development Bureau will offer subsidies or loans to owners through existing schemes. We will also step up publicity to raise public awareness of water seepage issues. The FEHD currently assigns a case manager to each water seepage complaint and has established a customer service team to promote knowledge about water seepage and owners' responsibilities for maintenance and management through outreach activities and seminars for the public and the property management sector. The JO has also set up a water seepage resource center to provide general information and reference materials. Customer service team staff answer general inquiries from walk-in visitors or telephone calls, and the public can also access information from the dedicated water seepage webpage. In addition, the government actively encourages the use of mediation to resolve water seepage disputes and strengthens the role of property management companies in handling such matters. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, the pilot scheme on community mediation is one such example. This pilot scheme provides mediation skills training for property management personnel to enhance their capacity to mediate the water seepage disputes between residents. Training combines practical knowledge seminars and role-play exercises covering basic mediation concepts and skills to promote dispute resolution. This enables property management personnel to intervene promptly and serve as a bridge between residents, improving communication and fostering community harmony as a result. We will continue to review the effectiveness of the training and strengthen cooperation with the Property Management Services Authority, that is PMSA for short, to explore ways to further enhance the role of property management companies in handling water seepage in buildings. I'm pleased to note that the PMSA launched the best practice guides on handling water seepage in properties last Thursday, that is October 16. The guides provide practical guidance to property management companies. The guide will be introduced at a continuing professional development seminar hosted by the PMSA on October 27. The FEHD will also participate to explain water seepage handling work, enabling property management companies to provide more effective assistance. Just now, some members expressed the hope that the GO can handle seepage arising from various issues. Under the current mechanism, if the seepage constitutes a public health nuisance, the GO will follow up under the PHMSO. If the seepage is caused by other factors such as rainwater ingress from rooftops, podiums, balconies, external walls, or windows posing building safety risks such as concrete spalling, rusty reinforcement, and so on, or due to defective rainwater or foul water pipes, the GO will refer the case to the Buildings Department for action under the Buildings Ordinance. If defective water supply pipes are found to be causing water wastage, the GO will refer the case to the Water Supplies Department for action under the Waterworks Ordinance. In order to make it convenient for the FEHD to handle public nuisance cases, we have amended Cap 132, the Public Health and Municipal Services Ordinance. Anyone failing to comply with nuisance order is criminally liable. And public officers can enter premises of the affected premises at 7 p.m. These changes have already taken effect. The current term government understands the public's concerns about water seepage in buildings. We are enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of handling water seepage through legislative amendments, promoting mediation, and implementing the enhanced pilot scheme for water seepage investigation procedures next year. The government will continue to explore feasible measures to help the public to resolve water seepage problems in buildings as soon as possible. Thank you, President.
Dr. Ben Chen, you still have 48 seconds to reply, then the debate will come to a close. Dr. Ben Chen. I thank members who have spoken in support of my motion on reforming the mechanism for tackling water seepage problems. Now, every member could tell their own story of water seepage complaint. That shows how extensive this problem is. There is no simple solution to solving the problem. We need collective efforts on different fronts, such as the legal, administrative, and policy front. And last year, I prepared a written submission on water seepage, and this year I have a supplementary paper. I hope that we can all make an effort to solving the problem together. And I put the question to you that Dr. Ben Chen's motion be passed. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority of each of the two groups of members present. I declare the motion passed.
會議現在暫停，明天9時續會。
The meeting is now suspended until 9 a.m. tomorrow.